understanding of who is on the call and who is participating. We're going to go through some legal requirements of this law. We're going to talk about the department's approach to implementation, and then we're really going to get into what this working group is charged to do. But with that, Commissioner Reynolds, I'll turn it over to you for an introduction.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you. This is such an important opportunity for all of us to get together and for y'all to really help us in figuring out what the calculation is going to be for A through F. So, I'm just really floored. Thank you so much. Like, there's so many people on here. I just don't even know where to start. But again, this really means a lot to us. And it means a lot that you are interested in helping us become better in this calculation. So we're coming together here to talk about this issue that's important to all of us in so many ways. And we're really excited to have your partnership in this work. So this fall, for the very first time since 2016, we are going to be implementing the state law to create a letter grade rating system for schools. It is part of the law, and we're going to really be focusing again on the calculation. That's what this is about. You're going to hear a lot about the history of this law and our process. Some of y'all that have joined our town halls, I know, have heard about this, and we really appreciate the fact that you are going to be part of this. Chelsea, you have a question? Oh, your little question thing was up. And I was like,
so
oh, they already messed up? No, okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, we're going to keep going. But I wanted to share a little bit about why we're here. So again, Tennessee passed the letter grade law to provide families and constituents and educators a familiar and easy to understand rating system of school performance. As everyone knows, this is super complex and it's a challenge, but we're going to do our best to get it right, and to get it right as an example for the rest of this country. We believe we have to be honest and transparent with our families, but also with each other, right? We really want to know what really drives school performance. How do we understand it, and how do we continue to build upon the great work that's already happening in many of our school districts? So here's what we hope to accomplish in the calculation that we're going to co-develop. For our first goal, produce ratings for schools that are clear and meaningful to families and school boards who already have expectations for performance as represented by a letter grade. Again, letter grade being a very easy A through F. Everybody knows what it stands for, and so really aligning with it in a way that folks can understand. Goal 2, recognizing the accomplishments in academic achievement, accomplishments in academic growth, and any other indicators that might be determined to be valuable for this calculation. And then goal 3, identifying areas of need or opportunities for improvement to support the planning and investments at the local level. This is going to help us ensure that a letter grade system that we have implemented is clear to families and provides a more honest assessment of how our schools are doing. And it's not that y'all aren't already being honest with your families, but this is also an opportunity not only for implementation, but to continue having the conversations about how the agency can work in partnership with you to support every single student that is on your campus. I'm going to pass it along here in a little bit to the team who's going to take you through some information to show you how we're going to structure these conversations. And we're very excited to hear your input. So again, thank you so much for your time and your partnership. And so now we're going to get to work. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Next thing we're going to do, as I mentioned on the agenda, is actually introduce ourselves to each other. I recognize it's a big group. I want to make sure that we all have a moment just to step back and meet each other, greet each other, understand who is participating in this conversation moving forward. So for the sake of everyone's kind of participation, I might just go around and call some names based on who I see on my screen, and then we'll go to those who might be on the phone. But Mr. Tim Parrott, I see you up at the top left corner. If you wouldn't mind to go first, sir, just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll go to the next person. You might be on mute. Can't unmute there. Let's see, Courtney Bell, are you able to unmute? We'll see if we can get you on your end and we'll come back to you.
Sure. So I'm Courtney Bell. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Practice at SCORE and excited to be here. Thanks, Chelsea.
Yes, you're welcome. Vanita, are you able to come off mute, ma'am?
I am. Thank you so much, Chelsea. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Vanita Doggett. I serve as the Director of Advocacy for Memphis Education Fund. Thank you.
Chrissy, I see you, Ms. Bollinger.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chrissy Bollinger, and I do research and work on special projects for Emerald Charter Schools in Knoxville.
Thank you very much. Tim, I see you came off mute. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, Tim Parrott, Anderson County Schools. We've just excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. Very excited to have you. Bob Nardo, please go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Bob Nardo, Director of Libertas Montessori Charter School in Memphis, and also of Arete Memphis Public Montessori Residency. We're a Tennessee educator preparation program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see Tammy Garrett. If you wouldn't mind introduce yourself, please, ma'am. You might need to come off mute.
Hi, I'm Tammy Garrett, Superintendent, Bedford County Schools. Glad to be here.
Very good. I see a few superintendents in a row on my screen. Joey Vaughn, you were up next, sir.
Hey, Joey Vaughn, Superintendent at Manchester City Schools. I appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Russell.
Hey, good afternoon. Russell Dyer, Director of Cleveland City Schools over in East Tennessee. Good to be here.
Thank you very much. Next, I see Wendy Hansard.
Hi, I'm Wendy Hansard, and I'm with the department. I'm the Director of Academic Support for Data. So I work with the core office overseeing the data analyst team.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next up, Tanya Coates.
Thank you for that. I'm Tanya Coates. I'm a 28-year veteran, originally from Knox County, but I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Tennessee Education Association in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We're going to go now to Margaret Bright. If you wouldn't mind to introduce yourself, ma'am.
Sure. Margaret Bright, Lenore City Elementary School, second grade teacher and a member of the Tennessee Teacher Advisory Council.
Thank you very much for being here. Dr. Morrison, if you wouldn't mind, come off mute and introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thanks, Chelsea. Sarah Morrison. I'm the Executive Director at the State Board of Education and happy to be with you all today.
Thank you very much. Christy Hovanitz, if you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself to the group.
Christy Hovanitz, Senior Policy Fellow at the Foundation for Excellence in Education, work on assessment and accountability issues primarily.
Thank you very much. We're excited you're here. Next up, I see Bob Eby. If you wouldn't mind, come off mute, sir.
Yes, thank you, Chelsea. Bob Eby, Chairman of the Tennessee State Board of Education, and happy for us to participate also. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Kim Conrad, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Kim Inglis. I'm an academic coach at Black Fox and Murfreesboro City Schools and also a member of the Tennessee Teacher Advisory Council.
Thank you very much. Excited you're here. Eddie Pruitt, if you want to introduce yourself, please, sir.
Eddie Pruitt, Director of Schools, Gibson County Special School District, and I'm excited to participate.
Thank you for being here. I see Francis.
Yeah, Francisco Moreno. I'm just a citizen. I'm not in any group and I'm not on anybody's clock. I'm just here.
Parent perspective. Excited you're here, sir. Madeline Price, please go ahead and introduce yourself, ma'am.
Madeline Price, SCORE's Director of Policy. Excited to be a part of the conversation.
Thank you for being here. Jenna Sharp, please introduce yourself.
I'm Jenna Sharp. I'm the principal at Clinton Elementary School, and I'm also excited to learn more about this process. So thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Mr. J.C. Bowman, please introduce yourself to the group. Oh, you're on mute. You need to just hit your unmute button. Oh, we'll see if we can't hear you yet. We'll see if we can help on our end, but if you want to keep trying to unmute on your end, we're going to come right back to you. Next up, Jean Luna Vetter, please introduce yourself, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. Jean Luna Vetter, Superintendent in Clarksville, Montgomery County.
Thank you very much. I see Christy Carol Highfill. If you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Absolutely. I'm Christy Carroll Heifel. I'm a parent here in Hamilton County. I'm part of the Family Engagement Council, and I'm also the Vice President of Advocacy for Tennessee PTA.
Very good. Thank you for being here, JC. I see you came off mute.
Finally, JC Bowman, Executive Director of Professional Educators of Tennessee. Glad to be with you guys today.
Thank you very much, sir. I am going to call on Kevin Deck. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Kevin Deck. I'm the Assessment Analyst in Williamson County Schools.
Very good. Next up, I see Norma Gerald.
Norma Gerald, Superintendent in Paris Special School District, representing Northwest Tennessee. So thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. I see Warren Wells. If you would introduce yourself to the group, please, sir.
Yeah, hey, Chelsea. This is Warren Wells, State Board of Education member. Glad to be here.
Very excited to have you. I think I've gotten through folks that I can see on my screen. Actually, I have not. I see Jim McIntyre. If you would come off and introduce yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Glad to be here. My name is Jim McIntyre. I'm the Dean of the College of Education and Assistant Provost for Academic Excellence at Belmont University and former Superintendent of Schools in Knoxville, Knox County Schools. And so delighted to be a part of this really remarkable group that you've assembled to have this important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I think I've got a few folks who have dialed in today. I see a 615 number and a 901 number. So person in 615, I will invite you to come off mute and introduce yourself to the group. We will come back to that one. The person with the 901 cell phone number, you want to come off mute and introduce yourself to the group. All right, we'll see if those folks are able to unmute themselves here in a little bit. I also want to acknowledge there are a few members who have let us know they will join just a little bit late today. So we'll make sure to kind of send you all the list of everyone who is on this call. We'll be able to share that just so that you have a good sense of who is here and working together on this very important task at hand. For the sake of time, I want to invite our team TDOE to actually wave and kind of announce their presence here. We've got a number of folks who are going to be participating in these meetings, and we're really here to support you in contributing your input, your preference. Of course, you heard already from Commissioner Reynolds. Deputy Commissioner Sam Piercy is on the call, myself, Chelsea Crawford, who is Chief of Staff. Christy Brown is our Chief Academic Officer. David Laird, Assistant Commissioner for Assessment and Accountability. Grace Shelton, Assistant Commissioner for Performance and Evaluation. Victoria Robinson, Assistant Commissioner for Communications and Engagement. Amy Legrone, Senior Director of Engagement. Ginger Leach, Senior Director of Regional Support. She supports our core offices all across the state. Xiang-Ye Ho, our Senior Director of Accountability. Reed Cook, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs. Chelsea Sexton, Director of Communications. And you'll see a few others of us along the way through meetings 2, 3, 4, and 5, but just wanted to make sure to acknowledge the staff from our department who are here to help facilitate, to help take notes, to help make sure that you all have what you need as we move through this process. I'm going to double check the chat. I appreciate the comments that we've put in there. Thank you, Bob, for letting us know those two compliments. Really appreciate that. All right, so right now we are going to go ahead and get started with some of the meat of the presentation today, now that we've got a sense of who is on the call with us together. And some of you have been attending the public town halls. You've heard about the public comment that has been emailed in. Some of you have been involved in these conversations historically when this law was originally passed. And so we want to just level set for the entire group what it is we are here to implement in terms of state law, how we're going about doing that, and what you all can do to help us along the way. So just to give us a real quick indication of the law that we are tasked to implement as a department, I'm putting up a slide on our screen that's got a lot of words and they're pretty small. But this is essentially the Tennessee Code that calls for a school letter grade system to be put into place. And if you all will recall, this is passed a number of years ago. It has never been implemented yet. And in part because there were some years of data that was essentially off limits for inclusion or consideration in a rating system like this. I want to point out how actually brief this legislation was, and the law is actually very simple and very clear. When you look at all of the bullet points on the page, numeral or bullet point A, B, C, D, that is actually the language of the law that sets out this letter grade system. It calls for us to implement a system that will generate A, B, C, D, or F letter grades for schools, just in the same way that you see students bring home report cards with A, B, C, D, and F letter grades. We are instituting a process by which we will assign letter grades to schools. The law requires a few things. It requires 2 explicit components be included, and it gives us a little flexibility on a third. So if you're looking at your screen, you're going to see AA. That requires us to include academic achievement in the calculation that will generate the letter grade system. AB requires us to include growth in the calculation to generate those letter grades for schools. AC is other outcome indicators of student achievement that we decide we want to put into the calculation that will generate these letter grades. We are going to put those letter grades out on the state report card. Many of you on this call are very familiar with that website that gives lots of information, lots of data about how our schools are doing, how our districts are doing, gives information about students and teachers, finances, other different kind of metrics and data points. But this is really, it's a pretty brief law. We know we must include academic achievement. We know we must include growth. There is an opportunity for us to also include other indicators which we can determine. Now, when we think about achievement and student performance in terms of achievement, and we think about growth, those two things may seem a little similar, but they're actually very different. And we want to make sure that we are kind of talking through those components intentionally over the course of our meetings. We're going to have a period of time where we dive deeply on academic achievement. We're going to have a period of time where we dive deeply on student growth. And we'll have a period of time where we dive deeply on indicators. And the very last meeting of this group, we will come together and figure out how do we prioritize, how do we weight these components, these subparts of the calculation based on the way that we want to see this calculation be developed, the preferences and desires that we have for Tennesseans and families to be able to have that snapshot and easy to understand rating system for school performance. Now, I mentioned that this law was passed a little while ago. I want to give you kind of just a timeline to explain all those other bullet points that you saw further down on the previous slide. Of course, the law was passed back in 2016. It feels like that was a lifetime ago in some ways. And so we know that the members of the Tennessee General Assembly, folks across the state have actually been looking for this law to be implemented. And I referenced that there were a few times where there was a delay of implementation on this law because there were things that happened that essentially meant data was off limits for inclusion in a rating system like this. Many of us on this call will remember back a handful of years ago when we had some pretty significant challenges related to the annual TCAP assessment, moving Tennessee Ready to an online format. Was a challenge for our state. There were kind of protections around data that could not be included in a rating system like this for a period of time. You fast forward into more recent memory, we remember the pandemic created some similar kind of protections on data so that it was off limits in terms of inclusion in a rating system like this. But here we are all together in 2023. We are moving forward to implement this letter grade system for the very first time. And this is the year that you will see those letter grades, A, B, C, D, or F letter grades, go live on the state report card as required by law. So next, we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about the department's approach to implementation. So you heard at the top of this call, the commissioner set some very clear goals for our implementation of this law. really intended to prioritize meeting what the Tennessee General Assembly has passed into law. We want to meet the letter of the law there. We also want to meet the spirit and intent of the law. So first and foremost, our goal is to produce a rating system for schools that are clear and meaningful to families. We know that families already have expectations of what a performance indicator of A might be versus B, C, D, or F. When we are creating a rating system for schools, that it is going to communicate to families in a way that they are expecting it to. They already have expectations that an A means excellent performance, and so on and so forth. So we really want to make sure that in our first and foremost goal, we are producing rating systems for schools that are clear and meaningful to families. Second goal that we have for our implementation here, we would love to be able to recognize all of the many accomplishments in academic achievement and growth and those other indicators that we will determine here together. We know that our schools are working hard, our districts are working hard, our teachers are working hard, and most importantly, our students are working hard. And so when we think about developing a calculation for letter grades, we want to talk through ways that we can actually recognize within the letter grade system and calculation the accomplishments in those areas. We also, as a third goal, want to be transparent, honest about the areas of opportunity, the areas of need. There are lots of things that can be done in terms of providing support, planning, investing, kind of improving student outcomes, but we want to make sure that this rating system is not kind of artificially telling us that something is going really well when it might not be going quite so well as we would hope it would be. If there are areas for opportunities, we want that to have kind of an honest translation into that letter grade system while we still recognize those accomplishments. So that we may be able to kind of wrap arms around our schools and districts and communities to support an improvement in the student outcomes that we all share a goal to achieve. So over on the right-hand side of this slide, you are going to see kind of a ribbon graphic here, and that's really an explanation of the process that the department has undertaken to implement this law for the first time. Over the summer, we began public town halls. We went to 10 different locations all across the state, one in each of our core regions. When we think about the ways that our districts are actually kind of organized across the state, we have 8 core regions. We went to every single region. We also did 2 additional town halls, one in Memphis and one in Nashville specifically. Having done some town halls like this previously, we heard that those 2 very dense and populated communities might need a little bit extra opportunity. So we completed a series of statewide town halls where we invited all members of the public to come and contribute their input. Very, very well attended. We are very excited to see so many people participating in that conversation. The second kind of step or component of our approach to implementation has actually been a public comment collection. We have an email address where folks can email to us their thoughts, their priorities, their perspectives on what an A through F letter grade system should measure, could measure, or sometimes what it shouldn't do. But that public comment has been a really important part of this process as we look to implement. We want to make sure that we are hearing Tennesseans all across the state, representing all of our wonderfully diverse school districts and communities, and telling us what their priorities are. We know that we have some requirements in the law to include academic achievement, include growth, include those other indicators. But when we go forward as a department determining that calculation, we want to make sure that we are answering the call and hearing what our Tennesseans across the state would like to see. The third step in our process for implementation is what we are doing right here and right now, folks, and that is the working group. So I really appreciate that everyone has had an opportunity on this call to be able to introduce themselves to each other. We are going to convene 5 times. This is meeting 1, and we're going to talk through in a few more slides exactly what our task at hand is and how we will be tackling this conversation together. But the working group is really helping us kind of bridge the input that we heard from town halls, the input that we heard from the comment. We are going to look very deeply at what the law requires and deliberate based on what we've heard, based on what we know, our areas of expertise, and importantly, the goals that we've set out kind of on the left-hand side of this screen, how that calculation should look. The very last step in our process is actually publishing not only the letter grades A, B, C, D, or F, but we are going to publish the calculation as well. We want to be sure that any Tennessean can understand not only what an A, B, C, D, or F letter grade represents, but we want to be able to ensure that they understand how that letter grade was determined. What did we all decide as it relates to academic achievement or growth or those other indicators? What did we decide when we think about weighting and prioritization? So we want to be very transparent every step of the way. You all are here with us at number 3, and we really appreciate that you're bringing your perspectives to the table. I'm going to give us just a quick overview of some of the town hall schedules. Many of you attended those, and we appreciate it. You've come back to participate in these groups. So I just wanted to give us a quick snapshot of those kind of summer timeframe town halls that we completed. We're also going to talk through on the next slide exactly what we've heard in terms of public comment, not just from the town halls, but that email address as well. So here on this slide, we're going to get into a little bit of information about what we have heard thus far through public comment. This is all posted on the department's website. It is transparent. You all can go and read exactly what was said and submitted in terms of input for this process. Really, when we think about all of the comments that we've heard from all the Tennesseans across the state, it kind of boils down to 3 big buckets or 3 kind of areas of focus. I'm going to talk us through each of these 3 areas, but I also am going to call our attention ahead of time, after I kind of go through this slide. What we are really going to focus on as a working group is going to be that first column in orange and the third column in green. So let's start with the first column in orange, ways to think about performance. We heard lots of public comment about the indicators that are required by law, which is achievement and growth. We also heard a lot of good public comment about how to think about a particular indicator. So when we think about student achievement and proficiency towards academic standards that we know we have intentionally set to make sure our students are prepared with the knowledge and skills they need to be successful in their next step, whether that's moving on to the next grade or that is graduating high school and kind of going to post-secondary or out into the world. We know that the law requires us to include achievement as a core component of this calculation. We heard from Tennesseans all across the state that yes, they agreed achievement is a very important measure that should be included. We also heard about growth. We heard the importance of growth regardless of proficiency. We know that some students do not yet know what they need to know to meet or exceed the expectations for Tennessee academic standards, what we expect a student to know in a particular subject area in a particular grade level. Whether or not they are meeting or exceeding those expectations, we heard from Tennesseans all across the state how growth is a critical and core component of this calculation because it is able to help us really show that we are on the right track, sometimes if we're on the wrong track or if we're plateauing. So it was an important measure that will help us achieve some of those goals that we talked through a moment ago about recognizing accomplishments in our schools in terms of growth comments in particular. Now, I mentioned we heard a lot of information and comment about how to think about achievement, how to think about growth. These next 4 bullet points are really intended to help us kind of think about and understand what the public has said in terms of ways to think about performance. So we heard some commentary about performance in subgroups. We know that there are some subgroups of students who are excelling and some who may not. It may not yet be at a point where they are really achieving in the way that we would like for them to be. There was a comment about consideration within this calculation about subgroup performance, both in terms of bonus points and demerits. We want to be intentional in making sure that when we are thinking through developing a calculation, that we are not kind of covering where there might be significant need from a particular group of students. We also want to elevate when a particular subgroup of students is really doing well. So there was a lot of comment about the performance of subgroup, both in terms of achievement and in terms of growth. We also heard about growth in the lowest performing band of students. So when you think about subgroups, you know, we can talk about racial subgroups. We can talk about students who are economically disadvantaged, those who are students with disabilities, English learners. Despite all of that, we know that there are some students who are amongst the lowest performing, they need the most support. And if a school could demonstrate growth or especially good growth amongst those lowest performing students, could or should that be included or recognized within this calculation? We heard about cohorts, which was an interesting notion. A lot of times when we think about measuring our school performance, we measure based on the kids who were in that grade last year, and come time to measure it again, we'll look at the kids that were in that grade last year. The notion of looking at cohorts actually tracks the same students as they progress through their grades and through their educational journey. And so the comments that we heard about cohorts were, instead of looking at that kind of a singular time frame, is there a way to track the students over time, consider achievement in a cohort, consider growth in a cohort versus some of the kind of a single snapshot on the students who were in that grade last year. And then finally, in terms of ways to think about performance, we heard about trends over time. And this is simply kind of the use of several years of data as opposed to one single school year's worth of data. If we're thinking about achievement, in 1 year, that could be really good this year. It could be really bad next year. The same goes for growth. But when we start to look at multiple years of data, consecutive years of data, you're going to be able to see trends about if achievement is on the right track, on the wrong track, or kind of stagnating and plateauing. Same goes for growth. Are we on the right track, wrong track, or standing steady? And so final kind of notion that I want to put forward for you all to think about in terms of the comment we heard and performance is that trend over time and actually looking at a number of years of data. I'm going to talk through the second column, that turquoise color, communicating the letter grade, pretty quickly. And the reason is that is not going to be a big focus for this group. It absolutely is a huge focus for us in terms of implementing this law. This is kind of where we are going to be able to display, report to the public, to parents and families, exactly what the letter grade is, how it was calculated, and kind of where we go from here. But as I mentioned, that orange column and that green column is really the focus area for this working group. So I'm going to cover the turquoise column pretty quickly, and then we'll move on to other indicators. So second column that you're looking at is all about communicating the letter grade. We heard lots of comment about how to go about communicating and especially how not to do it. And so some of the comments, and I think that folks on this call have actually been some of the folks who have said this specifically, it is challenging to convey in a single letter grade all of the many things that a school could do to perform last year. At the same time, public comment has been very clear that we want to see a simple construction, meaning just a few indicators versus a complex construction, a very long calculation, a very long formula that accounts for lots of indicators. So even though we know that it's going to be difficult perhaps to account for everything that a school may do in a year to impact student performance, we have heard that we want to keep it simple. We want it to be understandable and we want it to be clear, especially understandable for parents and families. We've heard comments kind of on both sides of the coin about the use of a single letter grade. We know that parents and families are very familiar with A's and B's and C's and D's and F's. They already have perceptions of what those letter grades represent in terms of performance. And so if we're going to demonstrate implement a letter grade system for schools, it needs to be understandable to parents who already have those expectations of a performance level at a particular rating. A couple other comments as it relates to communicating the letter grade. We heard several different comments around reporting displays on the state report card, where to put what information, how to provide explainer resources, explainer text to really make clear exactly what we are measuring within the A through F letter grade calculation, how it is comprised, and what that means in a way that is parent friendly, and that's been a really common thread kind of through those types of comments. The final thing I'll mention in terms of communicating the letter grade, we heard I guess it was kind of a pointing out to us that what is measured will be the focus. And I think that is both encouragement and a little bit of a caution. We know that if we are going to create a calculation that will generate A through F letter grades, we've got to measure what matters most. And we know that the law requires us to measure achievement, which is a critical, important indicator when it comes to student outcomes. It requires us to include growth, which is another critically important indicator when it comes to student outcomes. But there was a little bit of a kind of heads up that what you measure in this A through F letter grade system will be the focus. So I know I went through the turquoise column pretty quickly. We're going to move on to the third column, which is other indicators. Now, to harken back a few slides ago, when we looked at the letter of the law, we know that kind of first bullet point we must include is a requirement for achievement. Second bullet point was a requirement for including growth. Third bullet point was requiring other indicators as determined by the department. And this is really, I think, the most white space area that we have in terms of developing this calculation. We've got a lot of options to consider. We also have some cautions in terms of communicating the letter grade. We don't want to account for too many things in the calculation. But let me tell you a little bit about what public comment has said thus far about other indicators. So first bullet point you're going to see there is elementary, middle, and high. And really what that is intended to communicate to you all is that there has been public comment that says what we do in elementary school is very important for students of that age group. We are investing heavily in many things that we know are foundational and kind of determiners of the success a student might have over the course of their education or their entire career or life. And what we do in an elementary space looks pretty different than what we're thinking about in a high school space. We've got older children who are just about ready to graduate, go out into the world, into post-secondary, into the military, into college, into career. And so the notion of an other indicator, as public comment has told us, is should we differentiate between elementary letter grades? Should the calculation for elementary school letter grades look different than middle school or high school? I'll also comment, and this is kind of a tweak or extra consideration related to this. When we talked with a lot of our school leaders and district leaders, we talked about the challenge of doing a particular calculation for elementary versus middle versus high school when we actually think about how our schools are structured. We know that there are schools in Tennessee, as an example, that serve kindergarten through 8th grade students. Kind of where is the cutoff for elementary versus high school? You get the same kind of situation on the other end where you might see some schools that have a 5th through a 12th grade kind of schoolhouse community. Where's the cutoff for middle school and high school in that scenario? And so we did hear, of course, elementary is a very different space. Maybe what we should consider is a calculation for elementary versus secondary that kind of includes that middle and high school grades together. So other indicators would actually kind of differentiate within the calculation something for an elementary school versus maybe that secondary kind of grade. Next up, we heard about chronic absenteeism. For those of you who have been part of these conversations since this law was passed, you may know that in the original calculation, chronic absenteeism was included as a component that was being measured within an A through F letter grade system. We heard lots of comments along the way about how difficult it is for schools to be able to control student attendance, particularly excused absences. When we think about students who may have significant medical needs, or maybe they are sick, or there's some kind of other reason that they would, have an excused absence. In the earlier version of the calculation, chronic absenteeism counted both. So there was some comment about what if we just count unexcused, or what if we just count excused absences? So there was commentary about tweaking kind of from the earlier calculation what of chronic absenteeism may be appropriate to include. But again, we talked more about that with some of our school and district leaders and actually heard some comments that kind of said, I don't know if chronic absenteeism actually is appropriate to be included as a component of this calculation. Is that really something that we care the most about when we think about generating letter grades about school performance? Maybe chronic absenteeism should not be included. And so we heard a lot of different types of comment about chronic absenteeism. On the flip side of absenteeism, we heard comments that were encouraging us to consider kind of the positive indicators of a happy or successful school. And instead of looking at, kind of absenteeism rates, why don't you look at attendance rates or retention rates? And that applied both to students and to teachers. We heard folks saying, when students are happy and they're getting what they need out of their school, they are going to show up every day. Should that or could that be included in the calculation? Similarly, for teachers, happy teachers and happy schoolhouse communities tend to see stronger rates of teacher retention. Should or could that be included in the public comment overview? So those 3 bullet points about chronic absenteeism, student attendance, teacher retention, they're very related, although there is nuance and difference between them. Couple other points I want to point out to us specifically on the other indicators green column. We heard a lot about post-secondary readiness, and it kind of harkens to that elementary, middle, high, or elementary, secondary space. Folks understand that when we produce students out of a K-12 education and they are getting ready to graduate, walk across the stage and begin their lives, that they must be ready to be successful in whatever pathway it is they choose. If you want to, go straight to a college, go straight to a career, go to the military, have a family, you need to be prepared in K-12 to be successful no matter what you would like to do after you graduate. And so there were some specific kind of considerations about maybe this should be included in the calculation. It was things like career exploration opportunities. If we see schools that are providing high quality, impactful programs or initiatives or opportunities for students to become aware of career options, explore, kind of determine, yes, I like this, or no, I don't like this, before they hit graduation, and even as young as middle school grades, could or should that be included in the calculation? Could it be recognized in the A through F letter grade system? We heard some very specific types of programs that I hope are familiar to most of you here. Career and technical education, advanced coursework like AP classes or IB classes, opportunities for students to be dually enrolled. They're actually in middle or high school and able to take on a post-secondary credit-bearing course. JROTC. There were lots of very specific programs that were called out as something that mattered to Tennesseans. It was important for us to ensure post-secondary readiness, and maybe these specific types of programs could or should be included in the calculation. Finally, in that bucket of post-secondary readiness, we heard about graduation rate. Resoundingly, folks want our students to be able to graduate from high school, and their expectation is that when they graduate, they are prepared to be successful out in the working world. There has been some kind of technical conversation that some of you may be familiar with between our agency and the U.S. Department of Education over the last year or so about graduation rate and kind of how we go about calculating that. There is a calculation for a federal graduation rate, and there is a calculation for a state graduation rate. I mention that because some of the comments that we saw called for the inclusion of the state-based graduation rate specifically, not the federal graduation rate, but include the Tennessee state-based graduation rate in that calculation. Last point I'm going to make as it relates to other indicators is all in the areas of academics and supports. It's the bread and butter of what we do in education. And we heard a lot of really important considerations there. Science and social studies kind of bubbled to the top. Many times in our accountability systems, we think about English language arts coursework, we think about mathematics coursework, but we don't always count scores for other subject areas, particularly science and social studies. Those came out in the comments. And the notion was, if we are investing in them, if we believe it's an important opportunity, important subject matter area for us to provide opportunity for our students, then why would we not include that in a calculation? We also heard in some scenarios, especially those smaller schoolhouse communities, when we account for only English language arts and mathematics and do not include those other subject matter areas, we may be representing the work or the impact of one, maybe two teachers in the building. When we think about Algebra 1, there might be one algebra teacher in that particular school. And if that's the only math course that counts in a particular calculation, maybe that's not the best measure. Maybe we can include other teachers, other grades, other types of math courses in that particular calculation. And so the notion of including additional subjects or including complete kind of sets of coursework within a particular subject matter area came through in that comment about academics. We also heard a lot of good input about some of the supports that we've put in place as a state to ensure our students are getting those really critical opportunities, critical skills. We've done a lot of work, a lot of hard work, a lot of very effective work in terms of third grade English language arts, ensuring early literacy foundations for students in K, first, second, and third grade. And we know, especially after this first summer of implementation around some of the additional supports for students in third grade who are not yet proficient in English language arts, we're seeing schools invest a lot of strategy and time and resource and dollars providing summer camp opportunities, providing tutoring opportunities. And so we want to make sure that, the comment was, we want to make sure that if we are thinking about kind of, especially in that elementary versus secondary space, maybe a notion of third grade or a summer camp or a tutoring support should be included in that elementary space. We also heard some comments about RTI, response to intervention. This is really intentional work that happens in our schools and in our classrooms to help students who need that additional support. And there was some comment about whether or not specific types of intervention such as RTI could be included or should be included in the calculation. So that's a lot of information that I've just kind of tried to boil down for us and create some common themes or kind of key trends that we've seen come out in those public comments. I mentioned all of these are posted publicly. You are going to see on one of our last slides that we are going to be sending that to you and asking you to read through those comments between now and our next convening. But this is a really, I hope, helpful slide just in terms of a snapshot of the types of things that we have heard in our process thus far. So what comes next? Let's go to the next slide. And our next steps of implementing this law for the very first time, we are at the process of the A through F working group, which is all of you wonderful folks who are donating and contributing your time and kind of volunteer spirit to help the department really do the best we can in developing a calculation. We thank you for that. We've mentioned that these meetings, we want this whole process to be as transparent and engaging for anyone who wants to contribute input as possible. So we're going to record the meetings, we'll post the meetings, the materials will be made public, and we really hope that you all, in fact, can actually take that those resources out to your communities, out to other folks who care about this topic, who might have input on this topic. Go ask the mamas and daddies in the neighborhood that you live in, kind of their considerations, their input, and bring that back for the group to benefit from. But at the conclusion of our working group, we still have more steps that will need to be completed before we actually see the final kind of product of the state law, which is those letter grades assigned to schools. Immediately following this working group's task, the department is going to be spending a lot of time on that state report card website. Again, that's where these letter grades will be housed. We're trying to make sure that that information is clean, is clear, is easily understandable, that there is not language on those pages or in those pie charts and bar charts and widgets that is opaque for parents, that just don't make no sense. We want to make sure that the language throughout the state report card, the way in which we are visualizing data, the way in which we are explaining data is very clear. We're also thinking about some improved and enhanced functionality to ensure that we can really help folks navigate between the pages. When you think about a school or a district's information, we want to make sure that it's a clean flow of information between those components, and we're thinking about some functionality improvements to that end. But of course, we're going to have a brand new page on there when we release the state report card this year, which will be that letter grade subpage. And so for those of you who have been to the report card website, you know there's a number of pages and tabs and opportunities for you to dive deeply into data of lots of different kinds. We are going to have a page that really unpacks the A through F letter grade that the school has generated. But first, really talking through what is the A through F calculation? What is actually in the formula that determines that ultimate letter grade rating? How are those things weighted? What are the scores or grades for each of those component indicators? When we think about achievement and growth and other indicators kind of in a calculation that generates A, B, C, D, or F, we also want to provide more information about how that school might be doing in achievement, how that school might be doing in growth, how that school might be doing in those other indicators, so that the A through F letter grade subpage gives us much clear information about the rating, what is included, what is not included to our parents and families. Ahead of publication of those letter grades on the state report card, we will also intend to do a lot of work with our districts and schools in terms of planning their communication around the letter grades that they will generate at the school level. But we also want to make sure that our folks in our schoolhouse communities have what they need to be able to talk about this data. Many of us on this call, I think, know that data can be a very scary topic for folks. It does not have to be. And so we want to make sure that as a department, we are being very intentional in supporting our schools and districts and the leaders in those spaces and being able to communicate effectively with all of the many stakeholder groups that we know will have access to these letter grades, questions about these letter grades, questions about what they can do as a next step, but also be able to explain to those stakeholders accurately some of the data components that are underlying that can be a little bit more difficult for folks to access. And then finally, last step in the process is the big release. We mentioned that we're doing the working groups right now. This is the group that will help us determine the calculation for that letter grade. We want to publish the calculation on the heels of this working group's kind of conclusion. And so first thing you will see is kind of here is the calculation that has been developed. Then we fast forward to November when we will publish the state report card website, and that's where you will see the actual letter grades assigned to schools. That's when you will see ABC Elementary generated this particular rating system and this particular rating in the system. So that's an overview of kind of where we have been, where we are now. I want to talk about what this group is doing kind of between meeting 1, meeting 2, meeting 3, meeting 4, meeting 5. So we're going to review the working group's task. What we are here to do together is to develop a calculation to generate A through F letter grades for schools. There have been lots of comment about, for example, the state report card and the displays and where and how we can put information on a website. There's been comments about timeline. There's been comments about the law itself. What this working group is really intended to do and is tasked to do is help us with the formula, help us with the math equation, help us with that calculation. So as we move forward through the process, we're going to look at those components that are required in law. We're going to look at achievement, at growth, at other indicators, and we're going to look at weighting. And this is really a math exercise for us folks. So we're excited to be able to do that. But I wanted to make sure to be very clear about what we are hoping you all can contribute input about, because there's lots of ways that we can think about kind of implementation of an A through F letter grade system. We want to hear all of the input that you have about it, but for the purposes of this working group, we are really going to try and focus our discussions on developing that calculation, that equation or that formula that will generate the A through F letter grade system. So a couple things about group norms and tips to help us achieve that goal of developing the calculation. We have some limited time together, and we've got a lot of folks on the call who are very eager to contribute some very thoughtful input. And we want to make sure to use this time well and be able to get every drop out of your participation as possible. We appreciate that you all have volunteered to do this and appreciate that this is something that matters so much to you that you are coming alongside us to help contribute some input. But we're gonna try and use that time really, really productively, and we're gonna provide some tips here on how I think we can go about doing that. So we've got a do's and don'ts column. In the do column, we want to hear your perspective. We want you to contribute what you think. We want you to tell us what you think about achievement and growth and other indicators and weighting. You all are coming from lots of different kind of stakeholder groups and perspectives, and you have different priorities or preferences when you think about how Tennessee should implement a letter grade system. We want you to bring that perspective, but we also really want to ask all of you to consider the perspective of parents and families. We know that that is first and foremost the intended audience for this letter grade rated system. And so while we want you to contribute your input from your stakeholder perspective, we also want you to think and kind of put on your mom and dad hat and think about those parents and families who will be consuming this letter grade system, and how we can really make sure that that kind of consideration comes through in our conversations. We are going to ask you to review the public comment. We will probably continue to get public comment as we go, and so our department is going to be as proactive as we can to publish that, to push that your way, let you know there has been more that we have received. If you would like to review it, here it is for you as an email attachment or a link. But we do want you to go through and read what those folks have said when they've sent us the emails, when they've chimed in at a town hall. There's been some really thoughtful input, and sometimes it's competing priorities. And so I think to get a really good grasp on what Tennesseans around the state have said thus far, we want you to be able to review that yourself. We want you to engage your communities. As I mentioned, we are gonna work together over the course of 4 more meetings. This conversation, of course, is going to be available to folks. We want continued engagement. We want you to go out and talk to your folks and kind of get their opinions, get their perspectives, hear their cautions or pitfalls, the do not do's, for example, and bring that back for the benefit of the conversation and really and truly for the benefit of the work. Last thing in the do column, we would like for you to provide very clear input. You will see as we go through meeting 2, 3, 4, and 5, we are going to try to prompt you with questions that generate a yes or a no, a left or a right, an up or a down. We're looking for that kind of black and white type input as much as we can get to, and we know that we will have differences of opinions across our working group members, but we are trying to get very specific, very tangible, very clear in the way that we are developing this math formula. So we want you to be as clear as possible, and we're going to try and help that be accomplished through some of the way that we ask you questions and ask you things to provide input on. Let's go over to the don'ts column. We don't want to forget the intended audience. And first and foremost, we know that as parents and families who already have expectations of what an A, B, C, D, or F letter grade might mean. That is absolutely the first audience that this law, I think, was intended to speak to and provide information to those family members. We also know that this is going to be a measure where we can look for the bright spots and we can see what is working well. We can look for the areas of opportunity so that we can plan and really come in to support students. And so we know that there are going to be additional audiences who will care about the letter grade system, who will want information about it, need to be able to understand it. But we don't want to forget those intended audiences, first and foremost being those parents and families. We don't want to debate the law. I think when you all go through public comment, you'll see that there are folks who feel different ways about the law itself, and that's all well and good. Everybody has a right to their own opinion. However, what this working group is really intended to do is develop that calculation, and so we want to stay specifically on the task at hand to develop the components, to think about weighting those components, to implement what we already know is on the books in terms of being a state law that we need to implement. We don't want to ignore the legal requirements. There's been a comment along the way and just conversations that I've been a part of where people have misunderstanding, misperception about what must be included, what will not be included, what the plans are, is the cake already baked, those kind of notions. We will continue to remind you that achievement is required, growth is required, other indicators is required, and we've got to weight those appropriately, but we're going to continue to remind that those are the components that are really called out specifically in the law so that we can kind of keep that at the fore of our thinking. We don't want to focus our time on reporting displays, mentioning a moment ago kind of the layout of the state report card, the color schemes, the language, those types of things. We are absolutely intensively going to focus on that work as an agency and in collaboration, hopefully with many of you and more folks from around the state. But for the purposes of this working group, we're going to set aside the conversation about the reporting displays and the way the report card could or should look. We're going to think very specifically about that calculation. And then the last caution I would just give us for the group, we want to try not to stray away from the meeting agenda as much as we can. You will see on this next slide that we've got intentional time carved out to have hopefully very productive, focused conversations. And I recognize that we're going to be talking a little bit about some of those required components. But just to be as productive as we can and as efficient as we can with our limited time, we want to try to stay on the topic at hand for each meeting as much as possible. So I'm going to go now to the next slide and give you a little overview of kind of what to expect. You all have seen this in your emails, but this is the schedule of meetings for the remainder of our work. So here we are at meeting 1. Check. We have met everyone. We are kind of getting an understanding of what it is that we will do in the remainder of the meetings. We're going to come back together next week 2 times, on Tuesday and Thursday. On Tuesday, we are going to focus all of our conversation on that first required component, which is achievement, academic achievement. On Thursday, we are going to come together and focus all of our conversation on the second required component, which is growth. We'll go home for the weekend. We'll come back on Monday. At that point in time, we're going to spend our conversation focused on those other indicators, what should actually make the cut in terms of being included as another important thing that should be included as a component of the calculation. And then we're going to bring it all together in our last meeting, meeting 5, and we're going to talk about prioritization. We're going to talk about weighting within the calculation, which should have a similar weight perhaps, or a heavier weight, a lesser weight, and we're actually going to talk about achievement, growth, other indicators, and how those things can be honed and kind of prioritized within the calculation. I mentioned that the meetings are going to be posted for public transparency. We're going to record these, and hopefully you all will be able to use them to inform additional engagement and comment from your communities. But I also want to make sure to say to everybody, they are all virtual. And so I know there's been some questions about, can I come to Nashville? If you want to come to Nashville, we'll have you. But please don't feel like that is a requirement. We want to make this as accessible for all of you and your schedules as we can. Finally, we're just about done with my slideshow here, folks. I want to outline the homework for meeting 2. After this meeting, you are going to get an email from us that has a couple hopefully very handy links and attachments to facilitate a few things we'll ask you to do before our next meeting next week. We want you to go ahead and review that public comment. We are constantly updating and posting and publishing the pieces of public comment from Tennesseans around the state. You've got the URL right there in front of you, but we will provide that in a URL as well in your email so that you can click on it and actually scroll through what Tennesseans have said about the components of this letter grade calculation. You're also in that same email going to receive some of those prompts, how we're going to think about tackling achievement during meeting 2. What do we want to think about to stay on the topic at hand and really dive deeply with an intentional focus on that first required component, which is achievement. So please keep a lookout kind of in your email inbox for that communication from us on the heels of this meeting. We're going to send those things out for you in your leisure time over the weekend. Hopefully you can peruse some of those public comments. You can peruse the prompts, and we'll be able to come back together next Tuesday to have a very rich discussion about academic achievement. Come back together then on Thursday with a very rich discussion around growth. So with that is kind of the end of the slideshow here. We do have our next meeting on October 10th. I put up on the slide the email account for letter grade comments, which you can continue to send in. I know you will not be alone in that regard. There are other folks who continue to send that. But that is also a really good point of contact for you all to utilize if you need anything at all. You can always reach out to me directly, but you can also email that letter grade, school letter grades at tnedu.gov to be able to access and get in touch with us as it relates to the operations of this working group. So at this point in time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know, Sam, I saw your hand raised, and If you were like me, you might have done it by accident, but I suspect you didn't. So if you want to come off mute, sir, and tell us what you have to say.
Thanks, Chelsea. I first and foremost just want to say thank you to everyone for being willing to jump in on this. I see a lot of familiar faces who have been putting a lot of work into Tennessee education for a number of years. So want to be sure to just say thank you guys for doing this. A couple of notes that I would just want to kind of say in summation. Bob posted a question in the chat, and so I just want to name it explicitly to the group overall. This is not about the kind of federal accountability rules. So for those of you who have familiarity with those, just being sure to note, this is a state system. It is about, what is best for Tennessee stakeholders. So it is kind of an open slate in that piece. And then I know kind of as a second point, we've talked a lot in this presentation about what it may mean to be working on a math formula and those kinds of pieces. And I just want to calm down the language about it to make sure that people know we're not talking about really minute business rules in this about in sizes of this population of students or other things. We're talking about some top level kind of philosophical questions as they play out in practicality. So what subjects should be accounted for? How should they be weighted relative to how much time we spend on them and those kinds of components? So I just want to make sure that nobody is getting nervous about the deep math of it. It really is about saying, how do we reflect the priorities for Tennessee in this system and kind of work through that piece as a math problem. So just putting that out there, again, echoing the thank yous on this, and then I will turn it back over to Chelsea.
Thank you very much, Sam. I appreciate that. And now that I have stopped sharing my slides, I can see everybody's faces again on my Microsoft Teams meeting. I know that I've seen some folks who have joined since the beginning of the conversation. Want to make sure to acknowledge that you are here, welcome you, and we are just completing the meeting that we've scheduled for today. So what we want to do from here, I'm going to pause very quickly just to hear if there are any questions kind of about what this group is intended to do, what we need to do as a homework assignment. As I mentioned, you're going to get an email that's going to give you some very quick next action steps. But if there's any clarification on the purpose of this group in developing a calculation, how to participate next week, how to keep in touch with us, I'll pause for a moment and hear any of those questions now.
Hey, Chelsea, this is Jim McIntyre. So the Tennessee Code annotated section that you quoted just says grades to schools. Mm-hmm. And I imagine there's a definition section somewhere that says it's public schools. Is that correct?
What you saw on that slide is the entirety of Tennessee Code as it relates to this law. And so I'll be able, and actually it's a good reminder, we'll put that specifically like a link in the email. You'll see it in the slide, but this is for schools and not districts, sir.
But public schools?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Not non-public schools. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Other questions about the purpose of the group, who we are, what we're here to do together? All right, I am seeing none. This is the promise. Oh, Tanya, I saw your hand just go up. Yes, ma'am. Please come off mute and let us know what you have to say.
So I apologize about that tardiness to the party. My question is this the complete group, or will there be people added as we move forward? Because I know it could get skewed if we start with some folks and then.
Yep. There are a few folks who were a little bit late today. Maybe were not able to make the meeting today. Of course, this is going to be recorded so those folks can catch up. This is essentially the working group, and I will promise you that we will be able to have very targeted discussions. Cool thing about this Microsoft Teams meeting is we can kind of go into breakouts and have smaller group conversations versus a floor of 50 people. Which might be hard to accomplish in this virtual format. However, I want to be very clear that we are going to be able to be transparent about all of those kind of sub-components, sub-conversations, and be able to make sure that everybody is aware of what others have said and perhaps a breakout group. The other thing is, we have heard lots of folks who want to be involved in these conversations, far too many, I think, to be able to accommodate in a productive way. And so what we've really tried to be intentional about at the agency is is inviting people who are representative of the state, representative of the schools and students that we serve. And we're encouraging you to kind of be a liaison, so to speak, back with those communities that you represent, whether you are coming to this party as a parent, only, or maybe you are here as part of a school or a district. Maybe you're here as part of the Tennessee General Assembly. Maybe you represent an organization. We want you all to please continue to engage with the folks around you in these conversations and help bring their input to the table. We'll still have that email address working all the time, and so you all will be able to kind of point folks to that resource as well to continue to contribute their input.
I appreciate that, Ms. Chelsea, for that explanation. So my next question is, since the department is still collecting comments in the comment section for the public viewing, will it be a point where it will be cut off, or is we just need to keep generating or keep looking at that information to make sure that we get the full picture?
Yeah, I think we're going to let the comments stand open through the meetings that we have next week for certain. I think what we absolutely don't want to do is shut down or kind of close or turn a deadline on for public comment as this group is kind of deliberating and discussing. If there are Tennesseans who want to chime in to support this group's work or direct this group's work, encourage us to think about something, we want to hear that along the way. I think, the commissioner mentioned this earlier, but we are trying as hard as we can to get this as right as we can. We know it's complicated. We know it's also going to be an incredibly powerful communication tool for families. And so we want to make sure not to shut down comment too early. But I will tell you, there's always opportunity, I think, to chime in with the agency and tell us what you think about this rating system, other ways that we implement laws. We're coming at it with a spirit of continuous improvement there.
Thank you for those two comments. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Courtney, I see your hand. I also see a question from Christy. It says, can TDOE send out the invites this week for all the rest of the times? Yes, ma'am. We'll do that on the heels of this meeting. So you'll have that blocked off on your calendar here by the end of the day today. Courtney, if you want to go ahead. Was that the same question, maybe?
Well, it's sort of related. So I know for the previous working groups, there was sometimes pre-work that we were asked to read or complete before the meetings. Will we have any pre-work for these meetings?
Essentially, it's the review of the public comment and kind of the review of the prompts. And so that's essentially going to be the questions that we will ask you when we come back together next time. So when we think about achievement on Tuesday, growth on Thursday, you're going to be able to review those questions, think about it, engage with your communities, kind of get input there. So that's essentially the homework items and assignments that we would like for you to do kind of in between the convenings here.
Awesome. And then I know also in the last one, I know in the group I was in, David and Sean were great about bringing us like models of, oh, if we made this choice, this is what it might look like. This is the impact it might have. Will we have any ability to see any of the potential options that are being discussed modeled out as we're having these conversations?
I think we absolutely want to hear from you all what would be helpful to see. And I know there have been others on the call with us today who have said, I want to look at what other states have done. Could you show me kind of models of what happens in, Georgia or Michigan or wherever? And so I think if you all have requests for supports, for resources, professional development even, please don't hesitate to ask us for that. We will do our absolute best to accommodate those things at every step of the way. I put up that slide deck with some of the TDOE staff who are here to help. There are more kind of behind the scenes who are very, very interested and are prioritizing giving this group what you need to be able to make really informed decisions and productively kind of co-create with us that calculation. So yes, ma'am. Other questions about the working group, kind of what we're here to talk about, how we're going to go about doing that in our next steps. Otherwise, I might call it a little early and give you some time to go read that public comment. Any other questions from folks on the horn today?
Yes, a quick question. I think I heard you comment that there's a chat or something where people are typing questions. On my particular Teams, it's a disabled option. So just FYI, it's no big deal.
Yeah, well, we want you to be able to chat. That's very weird and unexpected, and we will look into that to see if we can't resolve that. Thank you, Francisco, for noting that for me. Would never have known if you hadn't said it. All right, I'm going to do last call for questions. I don't see any more questioning faces, but we've got some folks on the phone as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and convene in this convening for today. Thank you all very, very much for joining us for kind of this kickstart conversation. We're going to be back together in a few short days. Keep an eye on your inbox for those materials. We'll look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. See you later.
Thank you.